Hey everyone! So Parshat Ha'azinu is a weird one to work with. The words are hard, the messages seem discombobulated, but it's important because Parshat Ha'azinu is a love song. Now it's not a love song in the Shir Hashirim way where there's this deep infatuation between two lovers. It's much more of the love of commitment, meaning that it's a real relationship that sometimes has ups and sometimes has downs. And just like any real relationship, it's going to be difficult some of the times, and that's why Parshat Ha'azinu speaks about us angering God and God wanting to punish us. But the point is that it's real, because through thick and thin, God is there for us, and that's why we have to describe that God is able to get angry at us, because the fact that He's able to get angry at us means that He still has a relationship with us. But that's besides the point. I don't want to focus on the content of the relationship in Parshat Ha'azinu. I want to focus on the nature of it. Because there are two psukim in our parsha that seem to describe two very different contradictory relationships that we have with God. And the first is in Pasuk Good of our Parsha, where we describe our relationship with God as Yisovavenu Yivonunehu, that God surrounds us and provides us with wisdom, Yitzrenu Ki Ishonino, and He guards us like the pupil of His eye. And then we have Pasuk Yud Aleph that has a different kind of relationship. It says, Kinesher Ya'ir Kino Al Goz Alav Yorechef, just like an eagle who hovers over its young when they're in their nest and wakes them up like that. Yifros Kanafav Yikachayu Yisa'eo Alav Rato, and the eagle spreads out his wings and carries the young on his back. And we have to notice the differences. Because if you look at your own pupil of your eye, the analogy used in the first pasuk, the pupil of your eye is something that's surrounded by the rest of the eye. It has an eyelid. It has multiple layers to protect it. It's something that the relationship that we have with the pupil of our eye is something that we're guarding completely. We're completely surrounding. We're always there protecting it. And that's the relationship that God is describing. He completely surrounded us in the desert, surrounded us with the Ananei HaKavod, with these clouds, and we were constantly feeling His warmth, His hug, His embrace, His love, His protection. And then we have the analogy of the eagle, the nesher, and that's a very different kind of relationship, because a nesher, an eagle, isn't a bird that hovers and smothers its young. A nesher is a bird that when it wants to wake up its young, it doesn't go into the nest, it kind of hovers over, creates some breeze, makes some noise, so that the youngs wake up. But the eagle intentionally doesn't overwhelm the young by putting so much pressure in the nest, and kind of takes a step back. The same thing when the nesher is carrying the young. It doesn't grip the young in its claws, and instead puts the young on its back. So the young feel a little bit free. They don't feel so overwhelmed by the grip, by the hug of the nesher. It's a much more laid back, hands off kind of approach to a relationship. And we have these two competing analogies. Which one is it? Is our relationship with God supposed to be this one where we feel it all the time, like the Ishoneno, like the pupil of your eye? Or is it supposed to be much more laid back, like the Nesher, where we don't feel it? It's a little bit more hands off. And the answer, obviously, is both. Right? Like any real relationship, the nature of our relationship with God is supposed to fluctuate. It's not supposed to be just warm and cuddly and we feel it and fuzzy all the time, but it's not supposed to be just laid back all the time. And if we only had one without the other, things would be off. Because imagine if your relationship was always that we felt God's presence, and we always felt that we were in His warm embrace, then we would never be able to get anywhere. We would never be able to grow. But if we only had a hands-off relationship with God, then we would feel lonely and we would feel isolated. So both of them are important in order to be able to progress in life. And that's something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us in this week's Parsha, that He's going to provide us with both at different times. This time of year, the Yom Kippur time, is a time we're supposed to, where God fills us with rachamim. Rachamim, Rav Hirsch explains, comes from the word rechem, from the word womb, where we really feel God's presence and we really feel dependent on Him. But other times of the year, we're not supposed to feel God as much. And both of those are normal. But it's not just on God to ensure that we have both of these kinds of relationships. It's on us too, and we have to do our part. That means sometimes we have to accept the warm, cuddly embrace, even though it's uncomfortable to be vulnerable, and it's uncomfortable to be dependent. But it also means other times we have to accept the independence, the hands-off approach of the nesher, even though it's lonely and even though it's isolating. And there are no set rules about when we're supposed to try to experience one kind of relationship, when we're supposed to experience the other kind of relationship. But it's like any real relationship, any true commitment that fluctuates in life, you kind of know. Think about any loved one you have. Sometimes you feel it more, sometimes you feel the relationship less. But you know, it's intuitive. We gotta rely on those instincts, not just with our relationships with people, but also with our relationships with God. And it's scary, but it's important to make sure that this relationship stays real, to be authentic, and to experience our relationship like it is in the moment, not because we picture the ideal relationship with God to be something that it's not. Experience your relationship with God as it is right now, because that's the only way to ensure the relationship stays real, whether it's like the Ishon Eno or whether it is like the Nesher. Everyone have a great Shabbos.